This episode of the Capsule in Conversation is brought to you by WeCure. A leader in health tourism, WeCure offers specialist EMDR trauma treatment whilst you reflect and heal in the Mediterranean. Reset your mind and well-being. Speak to WeCure. WeCure.co.uk/capsule. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Capsule in Conversation. I'm Natalie Anderson and today I'm joined by one of the leading voices in fashion and beauty, Editor-in-Chief of Glamour Magazine, Deborah Joseph, to talk representation, racial identity and ripping up the rulebook. So settle down, turn us up and get ready to join in with our conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you've all had a wonderful week. We are officially on the Christmas countdown now. So if you haven't already, it's time to whack on Michael Bublé, pour yourself a Baileys, and maybe, just maybe, watch Love Actually. Let's crack on with the festive feels, eh? We need to do all we can at the minute to inject a bit of much needed happiness into our lives. However, I, for one, am feeling very happy today as I'm joined by someone I've admired for many years, being an avid collector of magazines, as you all know, and especially the one that she's now the editor-in-chief of. It's the fabulous Deborah Joseph. Deborah, thank you so much for joining me today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with me. Now, before we get down to all of the many things I wanted to talk to you about, how are you doing? How are you navigating 2020?
Well, my laptop's not working today, so I'm currently on my phone, which is stacked on about 10 cookery books. So it's not the most professional setting I've ever had, but other than that, all good actually. Yeah, all good. My kids are at school. I'm sitting in the kitchen working. My husband's in the front room working. I only work 4.5 days a week. I have Friday afternoon off. And if I can, I work from home Friday mornings.
So does that work-life balance work better for you? Because you've got 3 children, don't you?
I was given half a day a week off by my boss because I said to him, I just want one day a week I can pick up my kids and be around in the afternoon, and that meant so much to me. So yes, it 100% helps with the work-life balance because we work hard and fast at Glamour and we get a lot done in the 5 days that we work. So even in 4.5 days I have a very, very busy week, and I just really wanted a half a day to focus on my kids and being a mum, and it's made a huge difference to me. Huge.
I mean, it's really good actually that your boss kind of has, met you in the middle with that, because there's so many organisations that really don't get it. They don't get what that struggle is, being a working mum, being the top of your game, and you want to perform and you want to do your job, something that you've trained to do your whole life, but you equally want to be a hands-on mum. I know I've experienced that, and it's why I've changed up my career slightly, is because it's so precious, those years with them, isn't it?
I mean, totally. And I think, it is really amazing to have a boss my boss has got 3 kids and his wife is a really successful woman. So I think he understands what that looks like. And it is having the empathy of a business and a boss, it makes a big difference to your life. It really, really does.
It definitely allows your staff, I think, to have loyalty to the company. Because I think once you instill that in people and they want to work hard and they want to get everything done, as you said, in that 5 days a week. I mean, I'm shocked that you're telling me, that that's kind of how you produce everything in such a short amount of time, really, because the amount of things that you get out and the brilliant covers that you do, it's amazing. So it clearly does work. And I think many people have found that this year, that actually giving people a little bit more flexibility is actually much more beneficial for their businesses, isn't it?
I think so. I think, I've got an extra 2 hours a day. I'm not commuting. So that's extra 2 hours a day for myself, for my family. I cook dinner for my kids in that time, whereas I'd normally be on the tube. So it's made a huge difference. And I think it's probably made all businesses reconsider whether we really do need to be at our desk the whole time. I mean, Glamour's digital first anyway, so it wasn't a massive shift for us. We basically got our laptops, brought them home and just did our job as usual. And we're on Zoom twice a day and we're always laughing and joking and being creative on Zoom. So we meet up every now and again. I do miss being in person with the team because I've got a really fun team and we laugh constantly. So I do kind of miss that interaction, but I think we probably work even a bit harder. There's less distractions.
Definitely. Now, as I said, as I introduced you, I am having to stop myself from fangirling a bit, as I've been an admirer of yours for many years, from your original role as associate editor at Glamour, back when it launched, 19 years ago. I was a student then at drama school, had every issue. And then to Brides magazine, where you were the editor during the time when I was newly engaged and then married. Then you were at the Daily Mail, and now obviously back at Glamour, at the helm of it, as it continues its reign in the digital space. I mean, personally for me, I feel like your voice has been with me through so many key chapters of my life. So how does it feel for you, knowing that you've been so influential to a whole generation of women who've grown with you?
Well, it's funny. I never think about that. No one's really ever said that to me before, because I actually took about 6 years out of the magazine industry. So when I came back to Glamour, I'd been out of it for so long. Most of my team hadn't even been in the industry for 6 years, so they knew nothing about my history or my background.
How dare they?
I mean, it's just a totally different generation. You know, if they start in an industry for 6 years and somebody isn't in it, they just don't know about you. But I think earlier on, you know, the concept of influencing people and being an authority and being having to be conscious about what messaging you're putting out there, I think that's come mainly with social media. Previously, it was only a one-way conversation in print. You know, you'd put the magazine out, you wouldn't really hear back what people thought of it until maybe you'd receive a handwritten letter from people, or then an email from people. It wasn't a two-way conversation. So you didn't really, I don't think I ever thought, also I was very young. When you're young, you don't think about these things. What influence are you having on people? Whereas now I think also becoming a mum has made me much more conscious of the messaging I'm putting out there. Whereas when I was young, I just thought, this is a fun idea, this is a fun piece, this is an interesting celebrity, we should definitely do it. It's the kind of thing that a Glamour girl or a Daily Mail woman would be interested in, and you just put it out there. I don't think I gave it much thought. Whereas now I think about it all the time, like, what's the messaging we're giving? Is this appropriate for women? Is this how the world that I want my daughters and my son growing up in? I think about that a lot.
I mean, for me, you know, there was a key point in my life where I was getting married, and you were the editor of Brides magazine at the time, and you know, you have your editor's letter at the front.
Yeah.
And just everything about that magazine at that time was like a Bible to me. I loved it. So many other women I know, you know, that was the first thing that as well I gave to my friend when she got engaged, was I was like, you need Brides magazine. It's like the Bible of getting married. And you know, your steer on things and your approach to things has definitely been a massive influence. And as you say, it's continuing now to, you know, Glamour is digital, and as you've previously described it, it's kind of future-proofed itself by going into that space. Do you think it was essential to move the title into that place as one of the leading global beauty brands, given that so much of anything that's consumed now is done via Instagram, or you know, or online, or TikTok, or Facebook? It's produced by influencers.
It was absolutely crucial, because it was 100% a business decision. So it was a decision made by my publisher Camilla Newman before I came on board. I think she literally looked at the business plan for the future for the following 3 years and just couldn't see, it just wasn't profitable anymore. She couldn't see how she could ever make it profitable. So it was a kind of do or die situation. It was like, either we need to transform and pivot this brand to a digital brand. Most of our audience were consuming the content on their mobile phones. It was something like 83% of the Glamour audience was consuming content on the mobile phone. And I think she just thought, it's now or never. And I think she was right. I think looking back on 3 years, had Glamour continued just in print, it just wouldn't exist now. From a financial perspective, it just wouldn't be a viable business. So I think from that perspective, it was very brave of her and very clever. I think also she looked at what wasn't being factored in. No one was really owning the beauty space at the time online in the UK. They were in America, but not in the UK. So again, beauty has always been such a massive part of the Glamour brand since the day it launched. And I think she was, again, very clever in thinking, right, we're going to shift the strategy and move it beauty first. So when I arrived, I was basically given this new strategy. I was told, right, okay, we want to be beauty first, we want to be digital first, off you go. And then I had to come up with a plan and a strategy of how to make that work. But that was fundamentally very much a business decision that, thankfully, 3 years on has proved to be fruitful.
Definitely, because I think as well, you know, in the earlier days, as you said earlier, it was the journalists kind of feeding out what we should be wearing, what we should be using, what was the next fad, anything. Whereas now, there's so much going on around us that I love the fact that you pick up on those trends, you pick up on Instagram. I mean, do you think that by doing that, that gives you a more engaged reader by, you know, taking what's going on in society around you as your influence?
Well, I think previously the main influence was, say, the catwalks, for example, or celebrities on the red carpet. They were our main influence 18, 20 years ago when Glamour first launched. That's who we used to look at for trends and stuff. Obviously, social media, again, just changed that completely. And suddenly, real women like you were growing big followings, massive influence, shifting and changing conversations. And you also came into the content space. So it really transformed unbelievably in a very, very short space of time. And, you know, every morning before we have a features meeting, I always have a quick look on Instagram, as well as reading the newspaper, as well as looking on other social media to see what the trending conversations are, what the topics are, what the looks are. And I think, you know, social media massively influences people. So for us not to reflect that and write about it would be remiss of us.
I mean, when you first took over at Glamour in 2018, you know, one of your first things that you did was you put 3 influencers on the cover, which was really brave. And you know, you had to kind of convince your boss that that was a good move, didn't you? Because they were so used to seeing the celebrity faces. And, you know, tell me about that conversation.
I think Glamour had always been forward thinking. They'd had an influencer on the cover once before. But, you know, I was basically, as I said, what I was told was we want to go beauty first, we want to go digital first. And the first thing that came to my head was, well, the real stars right this moment in the beauty and the digital space are beauty influencers like Huda Kattan. That was the first thing I thought of. So to me, it was a really obvious decision. But then when I went to show my boss, he didn't know who they were. He didn't know who these 3 influencers. He'd never heard of Patricia Bright. I think he'd heard of Zoella, but I think everybody has. She's kind of gone beyond social media. But at the time, Huda was a super successful businesswoman, but wasn't necessarily a household name beyond the beauty industry. And I remember having to show him, you know, search online between someone like Katy Perry and someone like Huda, and it was the same search. It was the same search online. So I was like, if we want to be big in the digital space, this is where the conversation is. And he really supported me, and it was hugely successful. It was really interesting. I think some brands at the time weren't that behind it. They were like, oh gosh, is Glamour going to move into a different direction, away from celebrities, which has always been, you know, it's always attracted big celebrity names. But I think it can all mix together. You know, there's no one rule anymore.
Definitely not with the online space. You know, I mean, I've been lucky enough to kind of see it from both sides, because my early career when I was acting and I was dealing with like celebrity lifestyle and everything, and then now in this space where I am as a working mom, you know, influencing and having my podcast, I've been able to see and had to move my business. I've had to really think about, if I continue just down the acting road, I'm going to get left behind, because actually everything is going digital now. Everything's being consumed on Netflix, on Amazon, streaming services. We're moving things onto YouTube. Things have been made specifically for YouTube. So we've all had to make that step across. I mean, if we speak about covers, when I was, in the early 2000s and Britney was gracing the cover and, we had Kate Winslet, I had every issue of Glamour. I loved it so much. Yeah, oh my God, I collected it right from day one. The Kate Winslet first issue with the orange and the blue. And at college, I used to have them all stacked up. I loved it so much. But
I mean, it was groundbreaking.
It was, and the handbag size.
I remember when I started there, I think I was like this 3rd employee. And I remember the editor then, Joe, saying to me, right, we've got 2 options. We can either go for a big magazine, as everyone else is, or we can go for this handbag size one. And I'm going to go for the handbag size one. I remember going, oh, really? I remember feeling quite scared at the concept of it, but she had such a strong vision for it, and she really revolutionized the magazine market. There was no question about it. And I worked there for 5 years initially, and it was groundbreaking to be part of watching a brand grow from a blank piece of paper to being such a successful magazine. It was really a privilege to work on the launch of it.
I think that filtered through, I think it filtered through to the reader, because I used to get it when I was auditioning in London. I used to pick it. It was the one magazine that I would fit into my handbag with my scripts. And I obsessed over it. I loved it. But it really came through how much it was bright, and there was so much energy about it. But now looking back, when I look at all those covers, it's very apparent to me how much there was a lack of diversity at that time. And I think obviously now, you again, in the self-love issue that you did this year, you had Katie Piper on the front cover, you know, you had Harnum Kaur on the front cover as well. You were really brave in going, no, actually, these people need to be represented. Do you think that now, taking the brand forward, that representation is key in your messaging?
I mean, anybody who looks at what we do now, they can see everything we do is covering the conversation around representation. You know, we very much see ourselves as a platform for, you know, multiple voices, a diverse set of voices. But, you know, Glamour was actually originally, when it launched in America, it was one of the first magazines ever to put a black woman on the cover. So it's got a history of representation. It's not something new that I've suddenly introduced. And I definitely think when Glamour started 20 years ago, almost, in March it'll be 20 years, I think it was a different time. And, you know, all editors were constricted by rules from their companies, from their bosses, that didn't particularly encourage representation. And I've written about this myself. I experienced it myself, that I was told, you know, don't put black women on the cover, don't put dark brown skinned women on the cover, they won't sell. And I was actively told that. And so was every editor that I knew at the time. And it was an open secret. You know, I'm not saying anything that people didn't know at the time. And I knew it was wrong. I took a cover to my boss at the time, and she was a Brazilian model, and she had exactly the same skin color as me, but blue eyes. And I remember him looking at me and going, she's a little bit dusky. Do you mind taking her back and bringing somebody else? So then I had to go back with a blonde cover, and that passed through. And that's just the way it was those days. It really was the way it was, and no one was saying anything about it. So we all kind of kept quiet. I did test the waters, and now I think I should have shouted harder, but I was scared for my own job at the time, because I thought I'd be seen as troublesome or difficult. And, you know, again, I wrote in the Times, you know, when I first started in the industry, I had NEW, not entirely white, written on my CV. So I already felt like an outsider that was lucky to have a place at the table. Didn't really feel I could challenge these narratives. Whereas when I came back into the industry 3 years ago, the conversation had changed so much. Diversity was already a massive conversation at Condé Nast, and I'm sure other publishing houses, and we were actively encouraged to be diverse. So, you know, I no longer had to fight that. It was amazing. It was encouraged, and that's how it should be.
I mean, I read that piece that you wrote for the Times, and it really actually inspired me to kind of contact you and say, I really want to talk to you, because I related to your story so much, having dark skin, dark hair, growing up in the 1980s in Bradford especially. It was a difficult time, and of the placement of where I identified and where I put myself and in what box. And, you know, people going, well, are you white, or are you brown, or are you this, and the feelings that I nearly cried actually reading that, but your how truthful you were about your mixed heritage, your faith as well, and how that's led to you experiencing negativity, discrimination. Do you think that having that early on in your life, that's led to you really wanting to stand up for those voices that aren't being heard, and, you know, give them a platform so that we can share stories, and that those voices do need to be heard?
Definitely. I mean, I think that anybody who's received discrimination, you know, as I wrote in my piece, for anyone who's not read it, you know, that I've received discrimination. You know, I'm 3/4 Iranian. I've received discrimination for being brown, but I'm also Jewish, and I've received anti-semitism. So I've had it on both sides. And also, I'm the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. And, you know, I think I've got a moral duty to make sure that other people don't experience what my family have experienced in the past few generations. What I think I've been relatively lucky. You know, we've lived in peacetime the whole of my life, and yes, I have had to deal with discrimination, but it's nothing to the degree that my grandma did in Germany, in Nazi Germany, and it's nothing to the degree that the black community have received in the UK. So I think I've got a moral duty now to speak out and to make those voices heard. I really believe that.
And from your own point of view, I mean, for me, it definitely gave me a sense of, a deep sense of compassion for people of colour, as to what, if I was experiencing being targeted just for, you know, being a light brown skin, then what were my other friends experiencing?
Exactly.
And it's so painful.
Well, we're so light brown, you and I, that we also pass as white sometimes. So, we don't even know what it feels like in the UK to be a black woman trying to get into the workplace, or just, you know, the way they're treated in hospitals. I've spoken to cancer patients and the way that they're treated differently. It's beyond comprehension. And, you know, I think where you can speak out, you absolutely should, and where you can influence, you absolutely should. And, you know, Glamour's got an 8 million strong platform, and I think that I have to use my influence for good in that respect. As I said, I see it as a moral duty.
I think that definitely comes across, you know, for me when, you know, it's kept me as a reader how challenging the magazine is. You know, there's nothing that you don't really cover, you know, sexuality, inclusion, body diversity. I mean, as you've said, you know, in 1939, when it was first launched, it was kind of, it did have that reputation for challenging. But I feel like in this time, it's even more dynamic in that sense. That there's a sense of almost ripping up the rule book and going, you know what, there's nothing that we're not going to cover. And I think that does maybe come down from you, Deborah, of going, right, okay, what are we going to focus on? What are we going to lift the lid on? Would you say that's fair?
You know what? I've got a really outspoken team, and they're a diverse team, and they bring their perspective to the table every day. And this is why it's important to have diversity in the workplace. If you don't have diverse voices in your team, then you're not even going to know what you should be speaking about, especially in journalism. You have to have diversity at the table. So every morning we have a meeting at 9:30, and the team all discuss their own personal experiences, what they've read in the news. And it's funny, we all pick up different stories that resonate with us. Wow. Based on our own personal experiences. Also, there's an age element here. I'm 46. I'm editing, you know, a brand that's for Gen Z and millennials. Most of my team are Gen Z and millennial, so they also bring in stories and perspectives and, you know, around diversity that are very different to the ones I bring in. So I do think that that's what makes Glamour dynamic. It's the multiple voices of the team that come together and push things forward. And, you know, I'm really lucky to be surrounded by such dynamic people, actually. I mean, if you saw one of our meetings, they're great fun. They're wild.
Really
they're wild.
Like
they're wild.
Can I come in, please? Just to be in and be like, oh, wow.
Nothing is off boundary. Nothing. Everything is talked about. Yeah.
I love that, though. I mean, moving away into a slightly different area, another thing I really wanted to talk to you about today was your journey with having your family. You know, you've spoken openly about this, and it's something that many women will relate to. You're a mum now to 3 beautiful children, but your road to having your family wasn't easy, was it? It was very difficult.
Very difficult, very. Yeah, it took me 4.5 years to fall pregnant. So actually the whole time I was working as the editor of Brides, I was trying for a baby. I was having IVF for 4.5 years that I was editor of Brides. I was having IVF. So it was really, really tough. And actually, Bride saved me. It really saved me. I think having a job that I loved, and it was, you know, a light topic. Weddings is such a lovely thing to write about every day. And it just really got me through a very, very dark, unhappy period in my life. And I'm very thankful to have had that job at the time that I did. Yes, it was very, very difficult.
But during those, you know, rounds of IVF and the constant, what I imagine must be a roller coaster of hope, then disappointment, then hope, and then how
Yes.
emotionally did you cope? You know, what did you do to keep going? And obviously you had your job, but, you know, what other things did you turn to?
Well, I don't think I did cope very well. It was probably the most miserable time in my life. It was terrible. It was just so bleak. And I really never thought I was going to have a baby. I was told by various doctors that I couldn't have children. And to me, it was absolute heartbreak, because all I'd ever wanted was to have a family. And I know not everybody feels that way, but I did. So for me, it was the worst possible news I could receive. What did I do? I worked. As I said, I really just got my head down and got on my job. What did I do? I did acupuncture, did some counselling, some therapy, did a bit of CBT. I think that was it, really. I don't know, I just put one foot in front of the other. I think that's what I did, really. Just took one day at a time.
I mean, for me, you know, the fact that you went so into your job, I think for me, you know, pregnancy loss and infertility, it has such a huge impact on our identity as women, because it's almost like, you know, you're not being able to do what you're supposedly designed to do, and that sense of, you know, guilt, shame, failure. I think I've had experience of this, like, you know, 10 years ago, my first pregnancy, and the sense of failure, I don't know if you're like me, become an overachiever. Like you have to succeed at something, because in all other aspects it's not working out. And I don't know if that was the same for you, those feelings of guilt or failure, shame.
Yeah, I definitely felt failure and shame. I mean, there's so much shame around infertility. Sorry, can you hear my dog snoring under the table? I don't know if you can hear it.
I love it. Do you know what? This is another doggy that I've got. I love this. I had Jennifer last week, and her dog was in the background. It was
she's
just
snoring away.
Yeah. We welcome dogs and children.
Sorry, going back to infertility. I mean, shame is a massive issue with it, isn't it? You feel there's so much social pressure when you get married. Within 12 months, everyone's looking at your stomach. And someone I think I've been married about 2 years, and I saw somebody I hadn't seen for a while, and they put their hand on my stomach and they went, "Are you? Oh no, you've just put on the mandatory £10 that everyone does when they get married." I had to leave the wedding. I was so upset that someone would do that to me. It was a man actually who did that. But I think you feel like your body is letting you down. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. And there's just so much stigma around infertility and childlessness. And it's difficult even for women who don't want children. They're still asked the same questions, even though it's their personal choice. In my case, it wasn't my personal choice. But the questions and the things that people used to say to me were just absolutely astonishing. Really, really astonishing. The assumptions that, well, you're too busy being a career woman, aren't you? So you don't want children. And your life hasn't really moved on, has it? Because you haven't had children. Even though I'd got a new job and moved house, according to this person, my life hadn't moved on. And just those little diggy comments the whole time, it really made life very difficult. I stopped, I started avoiding certain social situations. I started avoiding certain friends, certain people. And I know that I wasn't alone. I've spoken to loads of other women who are going through IVF, and they feel exactly the same as me. It affects your friendships, it affects your marriage, it affects your mental health, your physical health, it affects your bank balance. It really is an all-consuming issue that I don't think people talk about enough, which is why I now talk about it. Because, I was very private about it at the time. I did tell a few friends, but not many, and I swore them to secrecy. And I told, I think, 1 or 2 colleagues at work. But on the whole, I kept it very quiet. Now looking back, because it was shameful. And also, I just thought it's no one else's business. You're not asking a friend, "Oh, did you have sex last night to try for a baby?" So why would I have to discuss when I've gone for a round of IVF? And then people would ring me 2 weeks later and say, well, and I'm like, I'm not ringing you 2 weeks after you've had sex to see if you're pregnant, so why, it's just a very weird situation. I was very, very lucky that I ended up having children. It was, I was very lucky.
Your story of how, what you went through, I read your story, and it was astonishing to me what you'd gone through when you went to the clinic, when you looked into your stomach and you turned out you had an allergy with egg. Now, obviously, yes. I know that's not going to, be for the same case for every woman out there. But just, if you talk me through as well, that discovery of what happened whilst you were there, and how, cleaning out your gut really helped the situation later on.
So I'd had 6 rounds of IVF, and every time I'd had it, I was coming out in hives. I was itching like crazy. I was absolutely crazy itching. And then one day, just randomly, I was having dinner and I must have eaten an egg, and my fingers swelled up into welts, my thighs, my back, the whole of my body had welts all over it. And I didn't realise it was egg though. I just was like, what am I eating? I think I was eating some bread and some egg and some other bits and bobs. So I then spent months trying to work out what it was that I was allergic to. And I think the reason I became so allergic to it was because I was on a certain tablet that suppresses your immune system. And I think that's what did it. And what did I do? I went to a place called the Viva Mayer Clinic in Austria, which is known to improve your gut health. And I actually just went because I'd finished my rounds of IVF. I wasn't going to do any more after 6. We were actually going to then have surrogacy, and I wanted to clear my body out. I wanted to clear all the years of hormones that I'd had put in it, all the years of stress that I'd put on my body. I just wanted to clear it out. So I went there, and they were the ones who actually did an allergy test and told me I was allergic to egg, and they also told me I was intolerant to dairy. And I can't remember, I think it might have been them who said to me, when you have IVF, the solution that they put around the embryo before they put the embryo back in your body is covered in an egg solution. And so it just suddenly made sense. Of course IVF didn't agree with me, because I was constantly having something put into my body that my body was rejecting. So, that was one area of it. But I then, when I left there for 3 months, I cut out egg and dairy and a load of other stuff, but mainly egg and dairy. And within 3 months, I'd fallen pregnant naturally.
And
So it was
how was
really
that?
remarkable.
I mean, that feeling of seeing that pregnancy test and it be positive.
Yes.
How did that feel for you?
Couldn't believe my eyes. I literally couldn't believe my eyes. I really, truly couldn't. I couldn't.
And
It
was
was,
you just
in fact, I rang my husband up at work and I said, are you in a meeting? Are you on your own? You know, I need to talk to you. Something's happened. And the first thing that came out of his mouth was, has the dog died? Has the dog been run over? Because it didn't even occur to him that I could be pregnant. It just wasn't even in our thinking or repertoire that I would ever fall pregnant naturally. It was a miracle. It was a real miracle.
During that pregnancy, how did you feel at every point during the pregnancy? Were you nervous? Were you, did you embrace it? Did you enjoy it? Or were you slightly hesitant throughout the pregnancy?
I think I was very hesitant. I was really hesitant. I remember, I wouldn't fly for the whole of the pregnancy. And what else wouldn't I do? I didn't want to carry heavy things. I rested a lot of the weekend, and I remember every single day of the pregnancy getting home and going into bed and thinking, made it through another day, because we didn't know if I didn't know if I was capable of carrying a baby full term, because we never really understood I've got endometriosis, so I knew that was a problem, but we didn't really understand what the problem was. So we didn't know if there was a bigger problem that I then couldn't carry the baby. So every single day I worried, and I remember being 33 weeks and my doctor saying to me, if the baby comes now, you'll be okay. And I remember just thinking, oh my God, wow, I can't believe I made it this far. But I don't know, I did have a bit of faith. I did, when I felt pregnant, I felt this has happened naturally against all the odds. This baby's going to make it. I did feel that.
I mean, that relief when you got to 33 weeks must have just been, you must have just been elated completely.
Yeah, I don't think I was elated till I got the baby out. I think once I was carrying the baby in my arms, I think then I really believed it.
And then you went on to have 2 other children, absolutely fine, and you have three children now. But in that second and third pregnancy, did you still carry any of the the journey that you'd gone on again with you, or were you at any point able to just enjoy being a pregnant mum?
I think I was always anxious.
Yeah.
I think I was always anxious. I think when you've experienced any kind of problem having a baby, whether it's miscarriages or IVF or anything at all, an ectopic pregnancy, anything, I think in the back of your mind, you're always aware that something can go wrong. You're much more aware. I think once you have that awareness, it never fully leaves you. I think until you've got the baby, and I'm really superstitious. So I would never buy anything until the baby was born. When the babies were born, I think I took maybe one white outfit to hospital with me, and that's all I would buy. And then once the baby came, I'd say, and my mum was like, or my mother-in-law, they were like rushing out buying clothes for them, because I just didn't feel comfortable going out and buying a whole wardrobe. The only time was when I was pregnant with my third child, and I already had a boy and a girl, and I had 2 loads of clothing, and I found out what the sex was, because I thought, I just want to know, should I keep the girls' clothes or the boys' clothes? That was the only time I really mentally started prepping, because I knew what the sex was. But with the first 2, I didn't buy anything till the baby was born.
How did your family react to that? Were they okay with that, or did that ever cause any friction, in the sense that you've got grandparents that really want to be excited about being grandparents, or were they understanding to the...
No, they were understanding. They were totally understanding. Yeah, of course. I mean, they'd been through the journey with us, so they were as anxious as we were, really.
Oh, for me, I still think pregnancy loss and fertility is still one of the biggest taboos really around women's health. We don't talk about it enough. I was lucky enough to chat to the brilliant Dr. Larissa Corder last week when it was Baby Loss Awareness Week, and also previously about endometriosis. We don't focus on those things enough. When you think 1 in 10 women suffers with endometriosis and 1 in 4 women will experience pregnancy loss. More needs to be done, doesn't it? Because otherwise, when it's not working out, that's where these feelings of shame and guilt come from.
Absolutely. And I'm actually about to join a group that's going to be lobbying the government on these issues to get women's health made to be more a priority. Because if you read, I can't remember the exact statistic, I read it in the paper this week, that something like erectile dysfunction, which only affects a very small percentage of men, so much more time and energy and money is invested into that than any of the topics we're talking about, which affect a much greater number of women. So, you know, again, there's a sexism even within the health.
The disparity is terrible.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But I do think the conversation is changing. And again, going back to the influence of glamour, we talk about all of these topics because I do think, you know, we have influence, and the more we talk about them, the more likely we are to be able to change the way the government works, the way that laws work. And that's something I'm really proud of, having that influence.
I mean, definitely, as we've covered, you know, already today, personally, you've really put yourself out there over the last few years with different journeys that you've been on. Do you think that as we encourage people to have open conversation, that it's important for you as the editor-in-chief of, you know, one of the leading female brands out there to be the first person to take that step and open up in sharing experiences?
I think we should all be. I think we all should. I think the more women talk about things, the less shame there is. And that's anything from like money to fertility to anything. You know, when I was younger, nobody talked about their salary. I would never discuss how much money I earn. I've never to this day discussed with one of my best friends how much money any of us earn. Whereas all my team discuss their salary all the time. And I think from a woman's perspective, that's amazing, because removing that barrier and the shame around the conversation of money means that it will close the gender pay gap, because women will then know what they're worth. Are they being underpaid? And also we want men to also to be talking about those things, so then we can find out, are we being paid less than our male counterparts? So I think the more, it's not just a female conversation, I think men also have to be part of this conversation. And I think it's starting to happen, and I love that.
Definitely. But you know, as I'm saying, kind of, for me, it does start with people like yourself having the bravery to share their experiences, because when you see somebody like yourself sharing that story, it encourages, you know, everybody else to kind of go, oh, somebody's actually put it out there into the public domain, and, you know, and are talking about it. So I feel I can do it as well now. It is that kind of, you know,
yes, it does. Listen, I don't know about you, but you know, when I was having problems, I thought I was the only person in the world who couldn't get pregnant. I literally felt I was the only person in the world, because nobody talked about having IVF, nobody talked about miscarriage, nobody talked about how long it takes you to get pregnant. And, you know, actually anything up to a year is quite normal to fall pregnant, but most people don't know that. So after 3-4 months, they think, oh God, there's something wrong with me. And I've also found, if I'm being honest with you, people aren't honest. Like, a lot of people claim that they fell pregnant very quickly, but I know for a fact that they were trying for a long time. So people aren't always that honest even about their own journeys. And I just don't know how that dishonesty is going to help anybody else.
It's a social pressure that we've had placed upon us over so many generations of going, well, you know, you've got married, so now you should have the kids, and all this kind of social pressure as a woman. Because you're right, like, I know when I was trying to open up conversations around miscarriage 10 years ago, I was absolutely shut down. Why would you spoil it for people? Like, why would you spoil it? And it's like, well, nobody's trying to spoil anything. We're trying to actually be realistic, and, you know, and just actually say what the figures are. And
how were you shut down? Just
kind of like, when I'd mentioned to another friend about the statistics of pregnancy loss, and how, you know, to prepare, you know, you really should prepare yourself about this could happen. Why would you say that? Why would you spoil it? And it's like, well, I'm not spoiling anything. I'm trying to open up the conversation of what potentially could happen and what you might experience. And it's not that I'm being negative towards your pregnancy. It's that I'm just trying to almost protect you. But it just was not, nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody wanted to bring it into the conversation. And again, it was mainly women. Do you
think that's changed? Do you find that's changed?
Totally. I think it's completely changed. And I think that there's definitely still a lot more that needs to be done, 100%. But the fact that, you know, even you and I can have this conversation now, and the same as when we spoke to Dr. Larissa earlier this year, it was amazing the response that we got to her episode about endometriosis as well, and just how many people were like, oh my God, it's that thing of putting their hand up and going, me as well, you know. And I don't feel alone and isolated, because I think
exactly talking makes others feel less alone, and I think that's why I share it. And also, why shouldn't I share it? Why should I have any shame around my own life experiences? You know, I think the conversation around shame needs to be had more.
Definitely. I mean, even if we go back to our earlier conversation about identity, that I remember, and I know you talked about it in your piece, that line of, but where are you really from? Because you almost, and then you're almost shamed into going, and we're made to feel uncomfortable. Like, why is that?
It's a very strange thing. It's a very strange question. I think it makes you feel like you're not really English, you're not British.
Yeah,
Even if you're born here, you're always going to be reminded about your ancestry. But it's a bit of a weird one, because I'm really proud about, my heritage. I'm really proud of my Middle Eastern heritage. I cook loads of Middle Eastern food. I love the Iranian side of my family and all the traditions. I love the Jewish side of my family and all the traditions. But, it's not necessarily, I don't say that I have to explain it the minute I meet somebody. And it's just funny that they don't that's the first thing someone thinks about you. They're judging you, they're profiling you the second they meet you. And that's why it's a bit of a strange situation.
Do you think that's changing now, though? Do you know now in the current time
No.
You don't?
No, not at all. I think people get profiled all the time. I think it's like an unconscious bias that we all do. And I think we're only just starting to realize that. Even in the past 6 months, I had unconscious bias. I wasn't aware of it. We're all now starting to question our own unconscious biases. And that's an amazing thing. But just because we're talking about it doesn't mean that it's over. I think we've got a long way to go still.
Definitely. I completely agree with you. I mean, before we finish up, what is your hope for the future of glamour, and who would be your dream future cover star?
Well, my hope for the future of glamour is that it just keeps going from strength to strength and continues to enlighten and entertain women and educate them where it can, and be a fun place to work for everyone who works there. I don't have one person, because new people come along all the time. I guess for me, the perfect cover star is someone who stands for something, someone who's got something interesting to say. All the conversations that we're having, someone who's open, who doesn't pretend that their life is perfect, that makes other women feel bad about themselves. I think that's someone who's got something to say is always the most interesting cover star.
I mean, that in itself is such a huge shift, isn't it? In the past, it's always been hidden. The celebrity life has always been hidden. All of the vices, everything. It's always been, no, this is picture perfect. And now I had this conversation with Rosie Nixon actually a couple of weeks ago about authenticity, and how that is so much more of a focus now. And that's what we want to see from people, isn't it?
I think so. I think you want to know what somebody's about, and also but you want them to be relatable. I think you want celebrities, even celebrities, they're real women. They might be much richer than us, they might live in bigger houses than us, but fundamentally they're probably having the same problems with infertility. They're much more privileged than us. They can afford umpteen million thousand rounds of IVF without having to blink about it. But fundamentally, the pain that women go through is a universal pain. There's privilege attached that makes some people's situation easier than others, but a miscarriage is a miscarriage. It's painful for everybody involved, whether you're a celebrity or not.
I think we saw that completely, a couple of weeks ago with Chrissy Teigen and John Legend.
Exactly. I was actually thinking about her as I was saying that. No amount of fame or fortune is going to take away from the pain that she's just been through. It's horrendous, So, I actually my baby nephew died when he was a few hours old. So I've witnessed firsthand, the pain of long-term, he was full-term, he lived. I've watched my sister go through so much pain the last 3 years. And it's the most painful thing you can go through. It doesn't matter who you are.
But I think it's so important, as you say, that we do keep having these kind of conversations, and that we pull together, we stop having that shame attached to situations, whether it is money, whether it is infertility. We are, as a society, we do need to come together. We've had the worst year ever, but equally in this tough year, it's brought out a lot. When you think, I loved your cover with all of the NHS staff. That was amazing, and that was my favorite.
That was my favorite cover we've done.
Oh, it was absolutely...
we produced that in 8 hours. We decided at 12 o'clock that day. It was the first day that there was going to be the NHS clap for the NHS, and at 12 o'clock that day we were like, let's do it. We literally dropped everything. We stopped writing anything else, and the whole team got on it. And we were crazily texting everybody we know, saying, do you know anyone? Do you know a nurse on the NHS? Do you know a doctor, a female doctor? Who else do you know works at the NHS? And within 8 hours, we'd got the images in, we'd interviewed them, we'd written it up, and it went out, I think, 8:02 at night. So I think that was from a work perspective, that was one of the things I'm most proud about.
Oh, it was, well, for me as a reader,
Yeah.
I saw it and I was like, that is amazing.
Yeah, it was really cool.
And I think that is one of the things, obviously, that's come out of this year of how much we're, rethinking a lot and rethinking the conversations. And, I hope, and I'm sure it will do, Glamour is going to go on and do and make more amazing things and have those brilliant conversations that does get people talking. Deborah, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you with me today.
It's a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for having me.
It's been a bit of a dream for me, to be honest, because I've had the opportunity to chat to somebody whose name I've seen in print and pictures, throughout so many key moments in my life. So again, I really do appreciate your time with me.
I appreciate you asking me. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I hope you guys at home have enjoyed being with us too, and that you've managed to shut out some of the noise from the crazy world outside. I hope you've had a lovely, lovely rest. Glamour Magazine is available online at www.glamourmagazine.co.uk and across all social media platforms. If you'd like to keep up with Deborah's busy life as an editor, you can also follow her at Deborah_Joseph on Instagram. If you'd like more fashion, wellbeing and beauty content from us, you can visit our website at www.thecapsule.co.uk, where you can also catch up with all of our previous podcast episodes by visiting the In Conversation page and subscribing to any of our podcast channels and YouTube. Please do keep leaving your rates and reviews, as I love hearing all of your feedback. It's lovely. If you're a social butterfly, you can also catch us on Instagram and Facebook at Official Capsule. I will be back next week with another very special guest, but all that's left for us to say is goodbye. So goodbye from Deborah.
Bye everyone.
And goodbye from me. This episode of The Capsule in Conversation was brought to you by WeCure. Specialists in EMDR, trauma and mindfulness therapy, WeCure offers one-of-a-kind treatments whilst you reflect and heal in the Mediterranean. Reset your mind and well-being. Speak to WeCure. WeCure.co.uk/capsule.